Ladies and gentlemen, I would please ask you to take a seat. We're about to start our session. First of all, good morning. From 300 to 3,000. What if tomorrow's African champions were women? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this panel discussion on a topic of great significance for the future of our continent. I'm Deborah Mutund. I'm a proud Congolese woman, and it's a great honor for me to raise with you today this question that captures the immense potential that lies within the women of Africa and the role they can play in shaping the future of our continent. From 300 to 3,000. What if tomorrow's African champions were women? As we all know, Africa is home to some of the world's fastest growing economies, and women are key drivers of this growth. However, they still face significant challenges when it comes to access to finance, education, and markets. Well, in this panel, we will discuss how we can empower and support women entrepreneurs and how we can build a more inclusive and prosperous Africa for all. So I know you all can't wait to get into our panel discussion. But before we dive into this panel, I would like to welcome on this stage a woman with over 28 years experience in finance. She is at the moment Group Executive Consumer Banking at Ecobank Group, our partner, and she will be sharing her insights and perspectives on the important role of women in shaping Africa's future. So I would like you to help me join on this stage, Madame Nana Araban Araba.
Thank you, Deborah. Honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, fellow advocates for change. As I stand before you here today, I am reminded of the profound words of the famous African writer, Chimamanda Adichie. She says, "Culture does not make people." Thank you. She says, "Culture does not make people. People make culture." If it is true that the full humanity of women is not our culture, then we can and must make it our culture. These words resonate deeply with the mission we embark upon today, to empower, uplift, and celebrate the women of Africa. And indeed, yesterday, we did celebrate a woman of Africa. Shall we give it up for her? In 2022, female entrepreneurs significantly impacted Africa's economy, contributing a staggering $350 billion to the continent's GDP. Furthermore, the UN estimates that 70% of informal cross-border trade in Africa, which you will agree with me is a thriving trade, is conducted by women traders. These numbers urge us to explore a vital question. What if tomorrow's African champions were women? Today's discussions aim to address this question and pave the way for a future where women can thrive. Unfortunately, in Africa, we are confronted with a disheartening reality. Women still face persistent challenges across education, health, finance, domestic responsibilities, political participation, and much more. The fact that women are disproportionately in informal employment, such as the services industry, farming, and informal trading, leaves them more vulnerable to poverty and unemployment, as evidenced during the COVID-19 pandemic. The truth is, Africa's women are entrepreneurial. It is estimated that 25% of African women will either start or manage a business. We are leading the way in entrepreneurship, compared to about 12% in America and 5% in Europe. Unfortunately, however, African women are hampered by a lack of access to finance, market information, and face other gender inequalities. In a continent that is on a determined journey to inclusive economic growth through initiatives such as the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, these gender-based obstacles must be addressed with urgency. How can we reach our full potential if we are not genuinely treated as full economic citizens? By dismantling the gender barriers, women businesses will play a significantly larger role in driving Africa's economic development and providing much needed employment. I'm proud to say that at EcoBank, we recognize and are actively supporting women entrepreneurs to reach their full potential with external programs such as Elevate. Do I have to start again?
No.
Thankfully. Okay, that's good. So I'm proud to say that at EcoBank, we realize that we recognize and are actively supporting women entrepreneurs to reach their full potential. We offer external programs such as Elevate, a program which provides tailored financial solutions to women, as well as leadership capacity building for women-led businesses. Internally at EcoBank, we have already made strides towards promoting gender equality in our organization with our EcoBank Women Agenda and our recently launched Diversity and Inclusion Council that I have the privilege to co-chair with Paul Harry Aitnard, the Regional Executive for Francophone West Africa and Managing Director for EcoBank Côte d'Ivoire. The total employee population of EcoBank across our 39 countries comprise 46% female and 54% male. But we must recognize that we still need some work and must address these to ensure that the number of women in leadership roles do increase. EcoBank, however, is just an example of the many industry players actively working to address gender equity. Ladies and gentlemen, Africa has much more to do to level the gender imbalance if it is to reap the rewards of letting women play a full role in driving Africa's economic growth and prosperity. Together, we all have a role to play. Let us engage in a thoughtful exchange of ideas as we collectively work towards a future where gender equity thrives in every corner of our continent. Thank you.
Let's give a round of applause for Madame Nana. EcoBank Group, a business who understands the importance of gender parity. Thank you very much for your insightful words. And Madame Nana, I have to say your leadership and expertise at EcoBank Group and beyond serve as a shining example for all of us today. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, there's a few gentlemen with us today. Thank you very much. It is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker. And guess what? She's a woman. She's an expert in gender empowerment and inclusion in emerging markets. She leads the firm's global gender empowerment and inclusion practice And she's also a leader at BCG's Women Initiatives, which supports gender diversity in Africa. If you haven't done it yet, I highly suggest that you go and watch a TEDx talk on climate and gender parity. I mean, it was a very nice way of seeing it. I would like to welcome on stage Madame Zineb Scali, Managing Director and Partner at BCG.
Thank you, Deborah. Good morning, all. Bonjour à tous. Thank you for joining the session. Thank you for having me and inviting me to introduce this topic. A topic that may look like a figure imposée, a mandatory exercise of every CEO gathering these days, but that I view, as well as our panelists, I am sure, as a massive growth opportunity for our African economies and companies. The topic of the session is gender diversity, as Deborah introduced and as Nana very well articulated. And this is a topic that we at BCG have been looking at for a while now. As strategy consultants, we help our private sector, public sector clients generate value for their businesses and citizens. For private sector clients, this value is margin, revenue, shareholder value. For public sector clients, we're talking about GDP, employment, investments. You might be wondering, why am I telling you this? Because I want to anchor something very important at the beginning of this discussion today. When we advise our clients about gender diversity, when we conduct research on gender diversity, when I stand before you this morning to talk about gender diversity, I am not coming at it from a moral standpoint. I'm coming at it from a value, business value, dollar value standpoint. And research has shown time and time again that for economies, for societies, for investors, for communities, empowering women is not the right thing to do. It's the smart thing to do. Let me share with you a few numbers. According to the World Bank, if all gaps in gender employment were closed, African countries will gain 20% additional GDP on average. 20%. This is 5 times the projected growth for the African continent in the next 10 years. According to the UN Global Compact, companies that have the most gender diverse executive teams are 25% more likely to outperform competition in their industry. According to BCG research, startups led by women generate 10% more in cumulative revenue over a 5-year period. According to the Clinton Global Initiative, women spend 3 times more money on their families, mainly to educate their children. And I could go on and on and on. But the point is not to oppose, of course, men and women. And I know correlation is not causality, but I am sure we can all agree that bringing in different perspectives, be it women perspective, but diversity at large, is an asset. And not leveraging half of your workforce is a missed opportunity. But beyond all the numbers that you see on this page, the most compelling business case that I have seen and that we have seen with our clients is the ability of gender diversity to bolster transformation and cultural change. Our experience is that companies who have tackled this topic head-on did so in challenging times, because they were acknowledging that in these challenging times, they needed to look at their business differently. And what's best to innovate and to think out of the box than bringing in an influx of new people, of different people. And so they found it was a great way to transform the culture of the company and to boost its change capabilities. So now that we have established the business case, let's look at where we stand in terms of harnessing this potential. Globally, 47% of women are active versus 72% for men. In Africa, the number is a bit better, but let's say that, give or take, half of the women on the continent are not working. By the way, in Morocco, where I come from, this number is 20%. In the corporate world, 10% of Fortune 500 CEOs are female. In fact, last month, women CEOs finally outnumbered those named John. True story. In Africa, when we take the top 600 companies from the 24 African stock exchanges, only 6% are managed by women. And when we look at entrepreneurship, gender diversity is even more an exception. 3% of vendor funding globally is going to female-led startups. 7% of venture funding in Africa, it is much better, but it's still 7%, knowing that Africa has the highest share of female entrepreneurship in the world. 25% of entrepreneurs in Africa are women. So why is that? Why is it that even if it is the smart thing to do, why are we still facing these small numbers of women representation in the economy? Well, reasons are multiple, they're interlinked, they are complex, and they are very different from one country to another. Sub-Saharan Africa and North Africa are very different realities. Even within Sub-Saharan Africa, what's happening in Rwanda, that ranks number 6 in the global gender gap ranking, is very different to what's happening in Nigeria, for example, that ranks 123rd. But there are some common trends that prevent African workplaces from being truly inclusive. And from our experience, we could say that these roadblocks are of 3 different natures. Number 1 is culture. Culture of the company first, but actually culture of the country where the company operates in. According to our most recent study, 50% of women and men in Morocco and Egypt consider that if the father, if the husband earns enough money to provide for his family, then the woman should not be working. 50%. 30% of men and women in Nigeria and Ethiopia consider that at the same qualification, it is normal for a man to be paid more than a woman. And this necessarily has an impact on what's happening within a given company. This is what we call unconscious biases that we all have, men and women, here again. Adding to that the lack of role models, again, in a company or in society at large, this actually explains part of the cultural problem. The second, say, cluster is infrastructure. It's childcare infrastructure, of course, but it's also safety, security infrastructure. Again, within a company, but also outside, in the country where they live in. And then finally, the processes. Usually, recruiting, training, promotion processes are what we call gender neutral. Gender neutral means they don't necessarily take into account the specific needs of women. But guess what? Unconscious biases are what make us, all of us, recruit, promote, celebrate those who look like us. So if the processes are gender neutral, they actually end up being gender blind because they do not take into account the specific needs of women. To address these challenges, companies need to build a comprehensive understanding of the specific roadblocks that women are facing in their context. They need to design a robust diversity strategy, internally and externally, and they need to track the progress relentlessly at the highest level of the organization. And to do so, they also need to overcome a few myths that I wanted to share with you today. If the slide would move, which it does not. Okay. The myth will be on the slide, hopefully, in a second, but let's get going. Myth number one, diversity is not an HR topic. It needs to be a CEO and top management priority. Because remember, this is not about morality, this is about value. Whenever this was the case, whenever diversity was a CEO topic, change was sustained and positive results followed. Whenever this was not the case, the possibility that this was gender washing is real. Secondly, diversity is not only about having action towards women. It's not just about mentoring and coaching. It's not about fixing women. It is about changing a company's culture. If we want to harness the power of diversity, we should not make sure that women fit in. We should make sure that the whole context actually allows them to feel included. Thirdly, and this is my favorite, diversity is not a soft topic. It is not about coaching people. It is a highly analytical topic because it requires a deep understanding of the numbers, of the representation of women in the business, in the various divisions of the business. It requires a measurement of the perception. It requires scenarios to see where we stand in 2030. It requires identifying what we call the moments of truth, the moments that companies need actually to address. And it requires having a prioritized and quantified action plan, KPIs, the ones I mentioned at the very beginning. And lastly, diversity is not about external commitments. Because what legitimacy would a company have if it supports women entrepreneurs outside of its walls, but it is still stuck at the 5, 6, 7% representation of women in its own executive committee? But don't get me wrong. Private sector, especially in Africa, can play a key role to catalyze change in this field. If companies have concerted, at-scale, sustainable actions. Many great initiatives exist here and there, but again, what's needed is at-scale, concerted, sustained efforts. You see a few examples here. M-Pesa has made extraordinary strides for women entrepreneurs. MTN is doing great things in inspiring younger generations in male-dominated fields. Olam is also supporting women farmers through training and knowledge. Coca-Cola is supporting, again, women entrepreneurs, African women entrepreneurs. And I know that EcoBank has also great initiatives, and they're thinking of scaling them even more. But the point is, again, at-scale, sustained, concerted efforts. And you as CEOs have the possibility, and what I may add, the responsibility, within your own four walls and outside of it, to make a real difference and created value. And with that, I will turn to our panelists to get their perspective on the topic. Thank you.
Zineb, Scully, thank you for your powerful words. Numbers don't lie, ladies and gentlemen. Women are the answer. Thank you very much, Zineb. Your experience on gender-related topics in emerging markets has provided us with valuable insights into the immense potential that lies within the women of Africa. Let's move on. I think it's a great start. What do you think, ladies and gentlemen? I think we can make some noise for our two first speakers who were absolutely brilliant. Now it's time for our panel discussion featuring an exceptional lineup of speakers. It is my pleasure to introduce our esteemed panelists who are leaders in their respective fields and have made significant contributions to the economic growth and development of our continent. I know you can't all wait to meet them. Our theme is from 300 to 3,000. What if tomorrow's African champions were women? We're about to start our discussion. And as we've heard from our speaker, Madame Zineb Scali, women in Africa are crucial drivers of economic growth, but are still facing significant challenges. So without any further ado, let's begin the discussion on how we can support and empower women entrepreneurs to become tomorrow's African champions. The first one I'm gonna be calling on this stage is the CEO of Bank of Kigali since 2016. I would like to help me welcome Diane Karusisi. Please take a seat. Our second speaker is the only man of this panel. But I'm sure he will be equally brilliant. Please welcome on stage Mr. Jeremy Aouari, the CEO of Ecobank Group. Returning to our inspiring women leaders, it is my pleasure to invite Mrs. Mukwandi Chibesakunda, CEO of Zanaco, all the way from Zambia. Now, let's welcome our esteemed president, Dr. Owen Omogiafo, the president and CEO of Transnational Corporation, Transcorp. And ladies and gentlemen, last but certainly not least, we have Mrs. Zwera Yusufu, the Managing Director, CEO of the Aliko Dangote Foundation. All the way from Nigeria. Let's all give them a warm welcome. Good morning. I hope you are as happy and thrilled as I am. I'm truly honored to be with all of you today. We're gonna have about 45 minutes to cover 3 key points. I know you have a lot to say, you probably have a lot to say and a lot to share with us, but I'll be addressing my questions to each and every one of you. But if there is anything that you would like to add, a comment, an anecdote, you are more than welcome to do so. So I'm gonna start with my very first key point, which talks about financing and equality in financing. We're going to talk about the tools that are available to support businesses run by female entrepreneurs. And obviously, I'm looking at Diane. You are on top of a commercial bank in Rwanda, your country. Can you tell us what tools are available to bridge this gap and provide the necessary support to empower and uplift women entrepreneurs in their journey towards success?
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me and on this panel. I think it's a very, very exciting discussion. So Rwanda is known, I think, globally, and Zineb mentioned it in her remarks, for its commitment to gender equality. And we've done very well in terms of political empowerment, education attainment, health and survival. But economic empowerment is still something we're lagging behind, and I'm privileged to actually be in a position to support this theme, and I've become, over the years, passionate about this. So when you look at Rwanda, and it's probably a statistic that is important, 42% of businesses are owned by women in Rwanda. So this is amongst the highest globally. So this shows that women are in business, really. Women are in business. So for us as a bank, and I think Zineb talked about it, it's not only a moral imperative, it's a smart business move. Because these women are in business, contributing to the economy, to GDP, but also contributing to the progress of society. So what we've done is to look internally at the bank, at our portfolio of women. And the way we define it is we look at women-owned businesses, but also women-led businesses. And this is our women portfolio. And we've looked critically and in detail at this portfolio to find that 74% of these businesses were in the micro category. So this is important because you need to know what you have in your portfolio to design the right product, etc. So we looked at this micro segment and started to talk to these women to design products for them. And these products are not only financial products. And it's actually very important to look at non-financial products, training, focus group discussions, etc., because you want to empower these women and tell them that more is available for you and you have to be ambitious. So this is what we've been doing, designing the right products. We actually found out that many of these women are engaged in cross-border informal trade. So we wanted to design small facilities, small loans, few days, savings products as well for these women to conduct their business. But also we wanted to educate them, tell them this is how you grow from 5 million francs, which is about $5,000 facility, to a 20 million, because I think the theme of this Africa CEO Forum is from 300 to 3,000. So we want to start at a smaller scale. Let's start for a small micro business to a small enterprises and maybe eventually large corporates. So this is what we're doing in Rwanda, and it's, I think, very pleasing as a woman to be able to contribute to change in our country in our own way. And so far, I think it's been also very fulfilling. Thank you.
We can only imagine. Congratulations to Rwanda for being ranked number 6, as Zineb has shared with us, on gender parity. And I think it's a great example to follow for the rest of Africa. Mr. Jeremy, we were talking about, Diane was talking about adapting products for women entrepreneurs, talking about education. You at Ecobank Group, have recently launched the Elevate program. I would like to ask you, why was it important for you to design a program specifically for women?
Firstly, thank you for inviting me to this panel. It's something that I'm very passionate about, and many of my colleagues are, as you've seen, Nana, there. All the reasons that Zainab talked about are the reasons why we need to do it. So it's not purely an emotional thing, right, or a moral thing. Even though I have strong views about it, it just makes business sense, right? But we have to climb that mountain, and we have to correct the things of the past, because the odds are stacked against women when they're trying to run business, right? Whether it's cultural odds, cultural norms. When you look at facts, like where I come from in Kenya, only something like 4% of title deeds are owned by women. Yeah. Now, if you don't have property owned by women, then how are you going to now be able to to borrow or securitize your business, right? When it comes to educating women or the girl child, if that's not a priority, then it starts from there, right? So I think for me, when we look at Ecobank, we've seen the opportunity. We've come up with a product that was launched before my time. The only thing that I want to do now is to turbocharge it, right, and to just make it much bigger. And that's because we're in 35 African markets. So for me, the challenge is how do we empower and bring up millions of women, not thousands, not 5,000, not 10,000. And I see Nana is looking, going, oh my God, now I've got to figure out how to do it. We don't have the answers, but I think there are very specific things we're doing in Elevate, which is looking at those financial needs. You've just talked about some of them, so I won't repeat that. I think there's a lot around education. There's a lot around processes. There's a lot around networks, that women supporting each other. How do women find these opportunities to be able to get business? And also just trying to, like for me, the thing which I think is important is just having honest conversations about it. And I find that often doesn't come up, right? We want to pretend those unconscious biases are not there, right? Everyone is being politically correct. If you're being politically correct, in my mind, you're not addressing the issue, because people don't want to speak up. They know maybe they don't feel this way or that way, but they daren't do it. And if you don't attend to the issues, you'll never fix them. So we're very committed. I want to see how much we can lend. I think we've got something like $500 million of deposits that we've gotten through this program. I think we've got about $250 million of lending that we've done. But I don't see why that shouldn't be in the billions of dollars, right? We talked about the gap here. I think it was, what, 42 billion, I think, if I remember rightly. I always say, just start in your own house. Absolutely. I don't need to care what's happening. I'm encouraged to see the women here. The bankers are many on this panel. But if we each do our own thing, we're not competing actually against one another, because there's already a gap, right? So if we all do well, then we start attending to the problem just one day at a time.
Jeremy, I've got another question for you. Still talking about the Elevate program, do you think it has been effective? We've heard big numbers here. Has this program been effective for women entrepreneurs? And perhaps you have some success stories to share with us?
Yeah, it has been effective, but it's still early days, right? So I've given you the statistics around the 500 million of deposits, the 250 million of lending. We've got stories like, if we look, there was a woman entrepreneur in Ghana who started a preschool. She needed money to, as the business grew. I think we lent her $500,000. She's got now not just a preschool, she has a primary school, a secondary school. She employs several hundred people. I think 55% of those people are women. So women support women, right? And if there's a call out that I say is, women need to do that even more aggressively. I think it needs to be, because if women don't do it, who's going to do it for you, right? Soon men will feel like we're the lesser species, right? So we also need to support, but I would really say, so there's that, and there's many other examples that I can call out. But we need to talk about these stories so that women believe that it can actually happen. Because sometimes the research that I saw, for example, sorry to digress, was that if you compare men and women in careers or in business, men are more willing to take the chance. I'm ready, I can do it, right? Whereas women would be thinking, I'm not sure, should I apply, should I do it? That needs to change, right? Where it's like, even if I'm not ready, I'm going to put my hand up, right? And as leaders, we need to say, okay, maybe they're not ready, but we will support. And even if it doesn't work perfectly, we will work with you, not try to find fault with you, right? So the Elevate program, I don't want to overpromise. That's why I've got Nana heading it. I've got Paul. I've got the brighter people than me, right, who can do it. We've got Paul Harry, and I wanted to do two things. We needed a man and a woman, right? It needed to be led by a senior woman, who we have here. But men need to come to the table. All I give them empowerment to do is to hold me accountable for driving change. That's it. They can hold me accountable. You said you're supporting this, what have you done? And then I hold them accountable for execution. And I'm sure we'll build this program. Hopefully a year from now, we'll come and talk about more success stories that are meaningful. Thank you.
We are really looking forward to that. So this is an open question for you, ladies. What do you think are the specific financial barriers faced by women entrepreneurs, and how can they sorry for my English, it's still early in the morning, how can they overcome them? It's an open question. Whoever wants to answer the question is more than welcome to do so.
Perhaps I'll start, and that's primarily because we're going in this order, right? So as Zanaco, we did an analysis of the market to identify what the barriers were and what we needed to do about it, both in terms of the consumer, the woman out there as our client, as well as internally, our own staff. And what we found was that the first piece was not even access to finance, it's access to information. And what we began to do is financial literacy programs, and those have worked very well for us. Zanaco is a Zambian financial institution, just for those who may not know about us.
but we'll talk about that later for those who would like to know a bit more. So what we then tried to do was to deal with the access to information piece. And then as we engaged our clients and our staff, we put together a roadmap to begin to address that as a starting point. And then we also identified for the business clients that there is also an issue with regards to access to markets, access to supply chains. And some of that is because there's a lot of clubbing that happens in business. And if you're not part of that club, then you will not be brought to the table, so to speak. And what we created was our own table. And that's what happens when you have female CEOs, because then they're able to most likely work with other female CEOs to make something happen. No disrespect to you, Jeremy. I think it's amazing what you're doing in EcoBank, and the fact that you're holding yourself accountable is really good. But the only real way for us to drive this is by us actually leading the program. We're not victims. We can do something about it. And we all just need to rise to the challenge and make something happen. So we put together a program to address access to supply chains, access to the various markets, and it has worked very well, but there are some areas where we're not doing as well as we could. There are some businesses that are growing multiples, and our product, Z Women's Banking, which we launched to market, doubles every month in terms of the absolute number of clients. But there are some areas where we've identified that it's not quite working, and we're trying to address that. And in addition to that, from a community perspective, as Zambia, we had gone to 30% representation in parliament for women. We're down to 15%. So we've identified some rubber band behavior where we make 2 steps forward and then 1 step back. And what we now need to be is deliberate about how do we keep it going and see the impact that we're looking for to get from 300 to 3,000. Thank you.
We're going to get there. Thank you very much, Mrs. Mukwandi. As you've said, great companies can have great ambitions and great projects, but they have to be accompanied by governments. And this leads us to our second key point, promoting diversity, engaging the private sector alongside governments and NGOs. And talking about NGOs, obviously I'm looking at you, Madam Zuhra Youssoufou. You are the head of the Aliko Dangote Foundation, an organization actively involved in promoting diversity. My first question is really just out of curiosity. Why was it important for you to leave the business world and to now serve the country?
Thank you very much. This is a question that I get all the time. Like, how could you leave the World Bank Group? Like, what are you doing? But this has been the most fulfilling job that I've ever had. And I'll tell you why. All the information that we heard from Zineb is what we were talking about 20 years ago, right? And so there's been some progress, at least first now, these discussions are in the public realm, we're talking about it. You know, we have the CEO of one of our biggest banks in the continent who is on this panel with us. So there's been a lot of progress in talking about what to do. We know what's wrong. There's no new information about the unconscious bias, the fact that women aren't getting loans, the fact that we have education issues, the fact that we have lack of access to health care, that we don't have a level playing field between men and women on the continent. So if we're starting off with an uneven level playing field, I don't know why we're surprised that when we're adults, then the gaps are just, you know, as wide as they are, right? So now to get back to why I left, I had a wonderful career at IFC and the World Bank Group. We did the first gender finance program. Everybody thought it was wild and crazy. Why would a bank not lend to women in the first place? What are you talking about? This isn't even a product. This is not an idea. It's absurd. Like, what do you mean? And then we did the first one in Nigeria with Access Bank. And my full circle moment yesterday was when IFC is launching She Wins Africa, which is now an expanded, if you will, version of what we were doing 18 years ago, and that they're really serious about. So going from an institution to an organization that is led by someone who wants to change the continent, and now I'm talking about Alhaji Aliko Dangote, the difference is now we're doing it. So now we know. I know all the statistics, I know all the data. Okay, so what are we gonna do? What are we gonna do inside the organization? What are we gonna do with the people that we're serving as a not-for-profit organization that is established to help the lives of the less privileged? And so that's what I get to do every day, and that's why I left. Now, what we do in the foundation is we're really focused on health education and economic empowerment. I think yesterday in a discussion we were talking about empowerment, and someone was saying that women didn't need to be empowered, we just needed to claim our power back. Like, who's gonna give you power? Your power is already with you, but what we don't have on a big scale is opportunity. So how do we create those? How do we get down to the granular level of where people are struggling? And the struggle is what? From access to health care, access to child spacing, access to education, access to opportunities then when you grow up. That's where we want to make an impact. Because if we don't have an impact there, in 20 years, we'll still be talking about why we only have 5% CEOs at the top of our countries, right? So we need to start planning for the long term. The babies that are born today and tomorrow, what is their path going to be? And we hope that for every girl that is born today, her perspective is different because we've put in measures to make, her mom have access to better information, her have access to a better education, and no one is going to do this but ourselves. No one's coming to help us. There's no help coming from anywhere. We need to do this as Africans for ourselves. Thank you.
Madam Yusuf, I've got another question for you. With your experience at the IDF Foundation, I'm sure you've launched and started so many initiatives. To encourage the private sector engagement through government and NGOs in advancing in gender equality and women empowerment. Are you able to share the different initiatives that you've perhaps launched, and what are the key learnings that you've learned from these initiatives?
Okay, thank you. So in our economic empowerment pillar, we run 2 programs. One is something called a micro grant program, and this is actually my favorite program that we run because it runs contrary to what everybody expected would happen. The idea that Alhaji Aliko Dangote had was, we keep talking about this poverty. What if we just gave women, what if we just gave people money? Let's just give them a grant. Let's just see what happens. And so we did, and of course everybody thought that was crazy. You can't just give people money. Like, what are they gonna do with it? What do you expect as a result? But then we did, and so the microgrant program is targeting the 1,000 poorest women in all 774 local government areas that we have in Nigeria. And the idea is to work with the state. Of course, we have offices in Nigeria, but we're not in in every state, we're not in the offices. We work with the state to identify the 1,000 poorest women in each local government area. Those women then get a grant. Depending on where they are, they also get a phone, and we partner with Airtel when we did the phones. And basically what it is, look, you are all doing some kind of business activity. Everybody's doing income generation work. We're not calling this, they're not businesses, right? Like a SME with like accounting and P&Ls. These are micro income generating activities, yes? We're giving you this money to boost your ability to expand what you do. That's it. You don't have to pay it back. You don't have to say thank you. We're not giving you any capacity building. You take this money and go do something positive with it. And shockingly, almost, the M&A that we've done on these projects have shown us that 85% of the women have done something positive with the money. Some of them have been able to double, quadruple, triple what we gave them and have changed the circumstances of their lives. That's my favorite program. The other one is in partnership with a bank where we do a line of credit where we support. Our money is interest-free, of course, because we just need it to come back to us so we can relend, and the bank charges the lowest interest they can, and then the blended rate is 5%, which is the lowest that is in the market in Nigeria. And of course, I had to put gender targets in there, women targets in there, because when I didn't, they were just lending to all men because that was easier. Finding the women businesses took more effort, but now that it's a criteria, then that's part of what they have to do. So those are the two programs that we run in that empowerment space. And the lesson is, if we don't do things deliberately, they don't just happen, right? So we can hear all the data, all the statistics, we can know all the facts, but it doesn't change until we do something deliberate. Thanks.
Well done. I can see time is passing by very quickly. Madam Owen Omogiafo, my next question is for you. I would like to know how Transcorp has actively engaged governments and NGOs to promote diversity and gender equality within the organization and the broader business ecosystem.
So good morning, everyone. Thank you for this very amazing panel. And please permit me to congratulate our African CEO of the Year. Please, could we give her a round of applause? Congratulations. It was really encouraging. Amongst the, I don't know, for those that were in the hall yesterday, look at the roll call. And there she was, looking as gorgeous as could be. And then her announcements went, the way I jumped and screamed, you would think I was her technical assistant.
We all did.
And basically, that's how we are making the case for gender diversity. It's not about going into meetings to have endless conversations, drink cups of coffee, tea, etc., etc., etc. Like Zainab said, it's a business case. So how are we doing this? It's basically by example. It's showing that there is a case for diversity and that women, we are quite special, you know. You talked about the gender biases that exist. When I speak to ladies, what I say to them is, use those biases to your advantage. And how do we use this to our advantage? If you take a look, just take a look around. I was observing that practically all of us are sitting down the same way. Can you notice quickly? Legs crossed, tucked to the corner, spine up, chin up, don't slouch. We've heard all of these. We bring that natural elegance into everything that we do. I will talk about Nigeria because I don't think I can speak for all of Africa, but we have very similar tendencies. The way we are raised, the way we are nurtured as women, I don't know about you guys, but I kind of think that there's a lot of greater accountability expected of us. Yeah? So from time we are groomed to be perfect. But whilst being perfect, you are meant to also be shy and retiring. Be seen but not be heard. So when you're aware of this and you bring that innate talent that you have to the table, we get these appointments, and something I always really like to say is, please do not appoint me because I'm a woman. I would really appreciate that you appoint me because I have a fantastic resume that I am not going to be shy about because I worked hard for that resume. I worked very, very hard. I have made sacrifices to get the experience that I have, and I bring this. So fortunately, because of the position of Transcorp, by the way, Transcorp is part of a wider group, Heirs Holdings, we have the most phenomenal he for she ever on this planet, and that is Mr. Tony O. Elumelu. I'm just going to say it out there. Because when you look across our companies, we actually have the highest number of female CEOs within a conglomerate. You look at the boards that we have, we also have very high female representation. So for us, it's not about tokenization. And when we then go on to have platforms like this, it makes people stop to think like, wait, hang on, that was a woman who was just speaking. And we look at it, we showcase the results. Zainab, you talked about the 24 listed companies on the on the African exchange. Do you know that there was a research done by Africa.com? And what they found out last year is that the companies that were led by female CEOs outperformed the companies that were led by male CEOs in 2022. And that's what we take in all the matters we have when we're making those engagements to have conversations. We show them that when you invest in women, when you create that, or no, let me say create the opportunity, because like you're right, we have the power. Our problem is that we're too blind to that power. I suggest you watch Wives on Strike. It's an old Nigerian movie, but please do find it and see some of the power that you have further. They can't cook, they can't clean, they can't do much. When we just go on strike, we get a lot of things done, but I digress. But we look at it and bring that in such that when decisions are being made, it's understood that, wait, hang on, TransCore is now being run by a woman. A woman took over this huge conglomerate during COVID when everybody was running helter-skelter. And the woman working with her team, they've grown this business. So perhaps if we do the same with others, we can find it. And just also let you know about the effectiveness of this engagement by example. Just on the 28th of May, which happens to be my birthday, by the way.
Happy birthday.
And my son's birthday, the federal government of Nigeria released its list of national honors. And I'm very, very happy to say that on that list, which did not have a lot of women, by the way, 3 women from our group were given national honors by the president in recognition of the work that we're doing in the nation. Thank you.
Congratulations on that, Dr. Owen. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, so I'm going to keep my last question perhaps for the end if we have some time left. And we're going to jump right into our third and final key points, is to how to reach that 3,000 targets. Large companies, how women accessing management positions be encouraged. Madam Mukwandi, you have a remarkable banking career of over 20 years and holding executive positions in Zambia's financial industry, including being recognized as the CEO of the Year in Zambia in 2021 by the CEO Monthly magazine. Congratulations on that. We would like to hear your thoughts on the following question. How can we create an environment that fosters the advancements of women, enabling them to break through the ceiling glass and accessing management positions?
Thank you for the question, and I acknowledge that we don't have much time, so I'll be brief. But I think we go back to Zainab's presentation about the commercial business case, because that is really what delivers value for everyone. It's not an emotional issue, it's an analytical issue. And for us as bankers, that actually speaks to us quite well. So what are the numbers looking like? And how do we get to a point where we're driving the right outcomes and creating the right culture to get that 300 to 3,000? Because it starts with a cultural issue. Strategy is eaten by culture for breakfast, it is said. So what we need to be able to do as a community is to identify those areas that need addressing, the health issues that were alluded to earlier on, the community issues that were alluded to earlier on, and action. What is that action plan going to look like? And how are we going to hold each other accountable, as was said earlier on? What are those 3 things that each of us can do, starting today, to make a difference? And again, it's not just about us as women, it's all of us as a community, because it's the right thing to do and also the right business thing to do. So that's the starting point. Action, business, and make it happen. Thank you.
Short and simple: action, business, and make it happen. I've got another question for you, Madam Mukwandi. I would like you to share with us, based on your 20 years experience, I'm sure you've had to tackle and overcome difficulties. Do you have anything, any souvenir, any memory to share with us on the challenges you had to face yourself?
Thank you for that. I'm sure all of us in the room can identify with the challenges that we face every day. And as women in the workplace, what tends to happen is that there is a lack of recognition that we can be in particular positions, and not just as CEOs, but as managers, as leaders, and even whatever it is that we do on a day-to-day basis. My most recent example was that we sponsored a golf tournament as Zanaco in Zambia. And this is the largest golf tournament in the region, the Sunshine Tour. And we had worked really hard to make it happen. And I turned up on the day with my speech and everything ready. And I get there, and the guard refuses to let me in. He says, "I'm waiting for the CEO." Now, this is just an example of what we deal with every day. So in some instances, it could just be a simple person somewhere just looking at you and saying, "She can't be." Or it could be someone else deciding that you cannot be. Or it could even be our own self-limiting beliefs. I think that's our greatest barrier, because part of me thought, it's okay. I mean, I don't look like I am the CEO, so it's fine. I made excuses for him. And I said to him, "I am the CEO, actually," almost apologetically. And I realized after that, okay, we've got work to do in our own minds first. It starts with us and our own mindset, even as we achieve what are those self-limiting beliefs that we need to get rid of so that we can actually deliver beyond what we even believe we're capable of. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Mukwandi. Dr. Owen, you've also shared with me some challenges you had to face during your career. I'm sure there must be many of them. Is there anyone in particular that you would like to share today? And how did you overcome that situation?
That's a very difficult question, considering what we deal with on a daily basis. So just so you know, I committed 2 grievous offenses in my career. I'm young-ish, and I'm female. I became CEO at 38, which is not really what we like to hear, and was a listed company. But I think I'll go to the beginning and just share a few things. I was a banker once upon a time. I did banking for some years. And whilst as a banker, I was pregnant for my first child. So I've always worked and those kind of things. And I don't know, it was my first time. This thing called morning sickness and everything. I felt like a trailer had run over me. I would drink 1 cup of water and manage to bring out 9, 10. I don't know where the other 9 came from. So this is me who had like great reviews, great assessments, being told, "You're gonna go very far." Then I get my appraisal from my male manager. And he writes on my assessment, "Owen is slow and sluggish." Yeah, I like that, Jesus. You know, slow and sluggish. If you know me, you can't even accuse me of being that ever. And then put a bad rating. Do you know what I did? I walked away. Then mental health wasn't a big deal. We didn't know much about mental health back then. And this was 23-year-old me. But I knew that staying in that environment would kill me. And why am I bringing up this example? Because sometimes you see, as women, we continue to stay in, be it work environments, personal relationships that are toxic. And look, team, I think that the greatest gaslighting happens in the workplace these days. Sorry, not sorry. And I walked away from that, and I'm glad I did. I walked away, and I walked away into an organization that was fantastic, and they guided me through that first pregnancy. I didn't really need to go for antenatal because I always had some other woman who's coming to say, hello, how are you? And I was really skinny with this bump. So why I'm really sharing this because we all need to understand this as well. I've also gone through, because we talk about women having children and ruining or limiting their careers. It could, but it also may not. It's just really how you play and manage the factors around you. I have gone through all my pregnancies whilst working. I've also gone through the most painful thing that can ever happen to someone, which is the loss of a child. And this also happened whilst working. But you know what I've done with each of these challenges? I've just told myself, oh, when you cannot sit down and cry because it's not really going to change what has happened. It's not really around actually using certain positions to influence certain changes. So basically, we are told don't waste a good crisis. So anytime you're faced with a crisis, as we would be, let's see how we can turn it around for the next person that is coming up to be able to go further. So for example, prior to the loss of my child, we didn't have anything like a policy that helped you recover from such things. Now we have such. We pray we don't have to use it. But what it has done for the organization is that there's more understanding around it. But look, I'm aware of the time, and I'm just going to wrap up here. But please do not waste a good crisis. Use it to make a change for the next set of people coming behind you. Thank you.
You're right, Dr. Owen. We are running out of time, but I would beat myself up if I didn't cover the last point, the last question. So I'm going to ask each and every one of you in 30 seconds to tell us how to build a more inclusive culture within organizations, starting with you, Mrs. Yusufu.
I think that the first thing to do is what's happening today, this recognition of what needs to be done, right? And then just doing it, modeling it. In our organization, we've, set up a Dangote Women's Network to, recognizing that these are the things that we need to do to support, encourage, mentor, grow women in the group. Our boss has taken on the issue of women on corporate boards. We've been doing that. So I think everybody has to do what they, in their own house, you have to do it in your own context because there's not going to be any credibility to be screaming about, women's empowerment, how we're going to grow all these champions if we don't do that. And I wanted to just tell you an example of how we can do it. A couple of years ago, we were having a Dangote Cement Award night. I'm almost done, I swear. A Dangote Cement Award night, and the best distributors, the biggest distributors get a prize, and it's like a big party event. And the winner was a woman, Mrs. Beatrice. Everybody was shocked. How can the #1 distributor of cement in Nigeria be a woman? And she was. And so that was a game changer in a way where then the demands for how many people requesting to be Dangote cement distributors, fertilizer distributors coming from women increased, right? So the example that it can be done, that here it is, chairman of this organization, NASCON, is a woman. We have women on all the boards, and those women are advocating. So it's not a one solution thing. It's everybody doing in their own backyard what needs to be done so that we can get there. Thanks.
Mrs. Mukwandi, is it fine if we skip you, Dr. Owen, or you've got something to say?
So real quick, amplify what we're doing. A lot of women say they're not on social media. Could you please stop? You're not doing it for yourself. We need to create an avenue for others to reach us. We do lack genuine female role models. And I would also say amplify your influence within your segment. We all sit in rooms. Most of the boards I sit on, I'm the only female because I'm in an engineering dominated factor. But amplify and speak to them and see what we can do. But please, I do beg of you, please get on social media, be it LinkedIn, be it Instagram. It's not really about you. We need to raise role models for other women to be able to follow. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Mukwandi. Really, now I'm going to have to split it. 15 seconds, sorry.
I think it's about the young voices. You know, a lot of the time we're talking about the youth and they're not in the room. So how do we make sure that whatever it is that we're planning for their future, they're part of that conversation? And that's what we need to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jeremy?
I'll just say a few in rapid fire. I think we need to create safe spaces in the work environment for people to talk about real issues. Yeah, that's number one. And that's for both men and women, right? So it cuts both ways. So discussions like Owen, you mentioned, those are real things. I think we need to be very specific about our policies that address those real challenges, whether it's having crashes at work, whether it's, you know, if I challenge and say dealing with menopause at work, both women and men struggle with that as an example, right? Dealing with those kinds of issues. I think we need very clear KPIs. You know, what are the targets? How do we get to 50% on ExCos? How do we get to 50% on boards? And then those policies have to inform that execution. We need to celebrate women when they're successful, tell their stories, really out there. And I think one of the things that I saw from this that I took away is we should really use partnerships between companies. So you're not restricted to the successes of your company. You're open to what Dangote is doing or what Zanaco is doing, because this is not, as I say, it's not a competition, right? And I think if we don't get it right, also let's confront when we don't get it right. Yeah, it's okay. It's not going to be right 100% of the time. And then I would just end by just saying, look, step into your light, shine your light, embrace your light, and just do that, right? Thank you.
Diane, the final word?
Thank you. I think I agree very much with what Jeremiah just said. So what we've done at the bank, we've created a gender quality committee. You know, in banks, you have a credit committee, you have a liquidity committee, a risk committee, but we used not to have a gender equality committee. So it's to create the right systems and the right accountability, because this committee is there to check for me and check the progress, and we give them KPIs. They hold me accountable, I hold them accountable, and we see progress over time. And we enrolled in a program called Gender Equality Seal, which is a program that is championed by the government of Rwanda and UNDP. And this really helped us to look inwards, to do an introspection. And trust me, I didn't think we had such thing like a gender pay gap at a bank, because you have a women CEO. I didn't believe that we had sexual harassment and stuff like that. So it was very embarrassing for me to be put, to see all these realities that I didn't know of from my corner office. And now we have targeted, specific systems to actually fight against these things and to make progress when it comes to gender equality. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And this is how we have to end our panel. It was an absolute pleasure to have this discussion with you. So I will invite all of you to please return to your seats. Thank you very much. From 300 to 3,000, what if tomorrow's African champions were women? I hope you all had a great session. But as we conclude this panel, I would like to finish with an expert. She will come and bring us her expert perspective. And I would like to welcome on this stage the final words of Mrs. Lamia Merzouki, the Chief Operating Officer of Casablanca Finance Authority and the President of Women Working for Change Initiative from Jeune Afrique.
Thank you, Deborah. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Women Working for Change, WFC Network, I'd like to warmly congratulate and thank all the panelists for their insightful discussions and diverse perspectives. I would also like to seize this opportunity to say a few words about WFC, which is a Pan-African network born out of the Africa CEO Forum about 6 years ago. And it is today made up of more than 1,000 female leaders from across Africa. I've had the opportunity on many occasions to meet with several women from WFC, and I can tell you that they are real boosters. I mean, they are amazing African women with great energy, as you saw here. They are hungry for change and immensely determined to really shape the new face of Africa, the Africa we want. Delphine, on behalf of WFC, you are a member of WFC. I'd like again to congratulate you for the award yesterday and your inspiring words yesterday night. I see Danielle Benyamed right there. Danielle was at the inception of this network, Women Working for Change Network. So, I mean, your presence has always been very discreet, but very powerful at the same time. So I'd like you to give her a round of applause. I would also like to thank Coralie. Coralie, thank you for your amazing job. But, I mean, across all the countries, really, you are just incredible. So keep going. So today we have heard about several tools, I mean, tools to improve female representations in the corporate world, tools to support businesses run by female entrepreneurs, and so on. We, in WFC, we are lucky to have a unique and major tool, the first of its kind in Africa, which is the Gender Charter. The first objective of this charter is to improve female representation at all levels of the companies and to mobilize the CEOs. Of course, to echo Zineb as well as Jeremy's words, I mean, again, diversity must be a CEO priority, and it has to be anchored in business needs and tracked publicly. And this is exactly the purpose of this Gender Charter. Now we're also aware that this is not enough within WFC, and that we need to have a multidimensional approach. So I'd like to share very quickly what we're doing on the ground in We4She, which is the network that officially represents WFC in Morocco. You have heard about gender biases. So in We4She, we launched a special campaign called Mousawet, which means equalities, with the broadcasting of 4 videos where we showcase several types of gender-biased situations. And there were actually light and funny videos on a very special, I mean, and very serious subject. And we succeeded in reaching out not only the corporate world, but also the civil society, and that too is important. Of course, I mean, we received a lot of comments. Some of them were negative, but, you know, we didn't mind. I mean, it just further proved that it made an impact. We had a lot of other actions like sponsorships and so on, sponsorship actions. We have many, many other projects. Okay, Coralie, don't worry. And last but not least, I strongly believe that we, as women leaders who have succeeded to some extent, must give a helping hand to women who really need it. We must amplify other women, especially among less privileged populations. And this is what we have done in Morocco, and it has been encouraged also by Danielle. So on this note, I sincerely hope that all together we will succeed in making gender diversity one of the key enablers of Africa's transformation. Thank you.
Let's give her another round of applause. Lamia Merzouki, the president of Women Working for Change. Ladies and gentlemen, it is really the end now. Thank you all for coming by. From 200 to 3,000, I believe the next generation of champions are women, and it starts with all of you today. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to all our brilliant panelists, and I hope to see you again soon. Thank you very much.